Look into my eyes. Do you see fear? You come at me with sword and spear, but I come in the name of the God of Israel. Yes! Right between the eyes! Did you see that? Anyone? Of course not. Okay, then. One more time. Tally, not now. I'm trying to protect us from this Philistine. Whoa. No, not that way. Come on. Back to your mom. Right, Philistine. Oh, wait! Right between the eyes. Oh, of course. That one you saw. Tally! Tally, no! I'm coming, girl! Whoa, easy! Shira! I will bring her home safely. Whoa! Tally, wait, no! There you go. I'm almost there. Okay. Oh! Whew! Tally, stop! No! Oh, that doesn't help. That does. Stop. Thank you. Yena haleni nafshi yeshobeh yancheni b'mgalet tzedek leman shemo.
What you have just watched is a concept short or a musical animated feature film on the story of David, and our vision is to tell it in the same quality as movies like Tangled and Frozen. This is more than a movie. This is a movement to join people from all over the world to try and make the world's most watched animated theatrical release. You can show your interest in investing by going to angel.com/David. Growing up in the wild of Africa was the most incredible experience, and it was there that I bumped into the most amazing character of God and fell in love with him. At the same time, I was reading David's story, and it just really struck me. On one particular canoe trip on the Zambezi River, where you could canoe for days and not see a human being, I was reading the scriptures and I read, "I found in David, son of Jesse, a man after my own heart." And I thought how amazing it would be to do a film that would give people all over the world a glimpse into God's heart. We grew up on a farm that had no electricity. I only saw my first film when I was 14 years old, and it was such an electric experience. I was blown away by the power of film and the power of story to connect with people and move people. And from that day, I became passionate to tell a story on the life of David. The question is, can a group of farmers from Africa make a global hit that's going to reach the world? This is in and of itself an incredible David versus Goliath story.
There's an African proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. And in order to tell a story as big as David, we need people from all around the world to come together.
Over the last 20 years, Jackie and I have just been blown away by how God has miraculously drawn talent to us. Now we have the most awesome, high-quality team.
Like Nathan Stanton, who spent 22 years at Pixar, Jonas Myron, a Grammy Award-winning musician, Borja Montoro, a Disney animation alumni, other talent from massive films like Big Hero 6, Tangled, Finding Nemo, Zootopia, Moana, Prince of Egypt, and many more.
Our first breakout hit is Jungle Beat, an incredible and beautiful show. On our YouTube channel, we get over 2 billion views a year. We've got 7 million subscribers. We also recently released our first animated feature film called Jungle Beat the Movie. And incredibly, it was on Netflix's top 10 for over 2 weeks, both live action and animated feature films in the US. We are also doing a theatrical release of Jungle Beat the Movie in China later this year, and are in production of Jungle Beat the Movie 2. What really excites me is if you take Jungle Beat the Movie, we produced that for $5 million. And I'd really encourage you to go and watch it on Netflix to see the quality of movie we produced for that price. And just imagine the quality of movie we could produce on David with the proper budget. With David, we considered the route of engaging with Hollywood, and there is significant interest down that route. But we really felt that from a creative point of view, we need to stay the head and not the tail of this project. And it's a slingshot, like David went with a slingshot to fight Goliath. We really believe that the strategy needs to be outside the Hollywood system for it to work. In this vein, we are thrilled to be working with Angel Studios for distribution. Angel Studios did the TV series The Chosen, which has become the world's biggest TV series on the life of Jesus Christ. The Chosen has generated hundreds of millions of views and tens of millions of dollars. We've already got $19 million of investments and need another $35 million to complete this project. We need your help to bring God's heart to the world through the story of David. Go to angel.com/David to show your support for this project now. And let's join together to try and make the world's most watched animated theatrical release.
From Johannesburg. I know it is mid-morning in America, but yeah, really awesome to be back. We've got such an amazing live stream tonight. Welcome my co-host Rhonda Halbert, who we'll see again in a second. She was on last week and is just so wonderful. She's our music supervisor on the project, so I'm really thrilled to be co-hosting with Rhonda tonight. I'm just going to quickly tease. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Rita.
It's really awesome to have you on here again.
I love being with you. I miss you.
Oh, so great. I know I miss you. So it's really wonderful to see you so often these days. It's awesome. We've got such fun ahead tonight, Rhonda. I'm so excited to introduce our guests, everyone. And yeah, it's something really special we've got lined up. So I will share the names of the two amazing gentlemen who are joining us tonight. It is Dustin Smith and Ray Hughes, who are both, like David, poets, storytellers, songwriters, worshippers, musicians, and we are really thrilled to be chatting with them this evening. We're going to share throughout the show as well how you guys can get involved. We are currently gauging interest, so please head over to angel.com/David. So far, we've had over 15,000 people express interest for over $19 million. So we are so excited about that. And thank you so much to everybody who is expressing interest at the moment. We are just thrilled. And yeah, so just to keep going, the live stream tonight, the theme is modern worship from the historical view of David. And please like, share, and comment on the post. It really, really helps. And every comment is super valuable, and we read all of them, and we love and appreciate all of them. Thank you. So now, to introduce our amazing guests, I'm just going to share a bit of a bio, and then I'd love you, Rhonda, to just share your kind of personal stories and how you know both Ray and Dustin, because obviously they both came through you guys. So I would love that. So Ray is the founder of Selah Ministries. He and his wife Denise live in Florence, Alabama. Ray has been in full-time ministry for over 50 years as a singer, songwriter, and author. He's known by many as a humorist, a poet, a storyteller, and is recognized internationally as a clear prophetic voice, a revival historian, a gifted teacher, and a spiritual father. Ray has led tours to Israel, Ireland, Scotland, and Wales for over 20 years, and his knowledge and keen insight into music, worship, and creativity is rich with application for today. So just such a wonderful person, and I'm so excited to get to know him a bit more tonight. And Dustin Smith is a worship leader, a songwriter, a fourth-generation pastor, and he's also the founder of Here Be Lions, which is a ministry collective that focuses on discipleship, music, and community. With vulnerability, humor, and an unyielding love for God and his people, Dustin crosses denominational, cultural, and generational lines to share the gospel through preaching, teaching, and music. His songs include God Who Moves Mountains, Miracles, Belong to You, Praise the King, Rushing Waters, and Chaotic Love, and then, of course, I Speak Jesus. So before we start with the questions, I'd love, Rhonda, if you could give your personal introduction to Ray and Dustin.
Absolutely. First of all, so sorry Jason is not here with me. His schedule got changed last minute, and he is on camera on stage somewhere else. So I got the privilege. So first, I want to talk about Ray. If any of you who know Jason, know his history, he's been in the music business since he was 19, and way back in the day when we were in our 20s, which was only just a few years ago, we were at a teaching where Ray was actually teaching, and we had never heard of him, been under his teaching at all. And Ray spoke, first of all, he's got these incredible books on David's music, worship, Sounds of Heaven. The book Sounds of Heaven, Symphonies of Earth just rocked my world. So he spoke about the sound of heaven sounding like mighty rushing waters. And then, of course, in Revelation, it refers to God's voice sounding like mighty rushing water. And so in this teaching, he just absolutely blew mine and Jason's minds. And we went back home that evening. And at that time, he was a part of a little unknown band after DC Talk. And that teaching is actually what formed the name of Sonic Flood. And so Ray helped lay the foundation of what we believed as Sonic Flood and the sound of Sonic Flood. And so he has been a very valuable person that has deposited so much gold into Jason and I don't even think he realizes how much he has deposited into us. So we feel like he's got something to say that could speak into this film. He knows so much about David and David's heart that we just wanted him to come on and share the giant nuggets of wisdom that he carries and understands. With Dustin doesn't even know this story. I haven't had a chance to tell him. A few years ago, my family went through a major tragedy of the passing of my mother through a horrific disease called Lewy body dementia. The disease just nearly ripped my family apart, the way that we all had to walk through this and take care of her. A friend of mine saw that I was falling apart, and he sent me this little download of a band called Here Be Lions. And their album had just come out, and I listened to it from top to bottom and just wept through it because I was so broken at the time. And there was this little known song at the time that I never had heard it on the radio, I just heard it on the album, and that was I Speak Jesus. And I just wept through that and spoke that song over my family because we needed it. We needed it. We were falling apart. And so during this tragedy, a friend of mine invited me to church. I went to church with her and could not just walk into church and be okay. I went into church and just wept my way through it because I was still so broken. It wasn't until maybe 6 months later that somebody told me that that was Dustin of Here Be Lions, and he was my pastor, and I had no idea. So I didn't join your church because of your band. I joined because somebody brought me, and the presence of God just started to heal my heart. And so these two men have put so much into our lives that they don't even know. And one day we will all sit around the table with a big cup of coffee and laugh and tell these stories and cry over them maybe a few times. But we believe in the weight of what they carry, and we want them to speak into what we're trying to do for this story of David. And so I'm going to pass it on to them because they're way smarter than I am.
Oh man, Rhonda, that is so beautiful. I am batting away some tears here as well. It's really
Me
awesome.
too.
Dustin and Ray, it's so wonderful. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We are delighted to have you guys on. And I've got some questions. Did you guys want to say anything though before we get started on questions? I don't want to just kind of dive in.
Let me say it's an honor to know and to see how God weaves this beautiful tapestry over time. That we don't always know what's going on. We don't even know what's going on many times when we meet someone somewhere that we may have met before or may not. But it's a beautiful thing to know how God brings it back around in a beautiful way like that. And we're honored to be a part of this, Rhonda and Rita. Bless you guys.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd actually just say you should have told me that story earlier, so I wouldn't have cried like starting out. Like I'm just a mess. So
Yeah.
tears, lots of tears.
That's amazing.
You know,
Tears are welcome.
this also really speaks to the life of David. I mean, look, the harshness that life can bring and the hurt that life can bring, the trauma. David was rising up as a kid through really traumatic times and some really traumatic family issues and social issues, political issues, sin issues, all that stuff. It was all there. And then somehow his life wound up becoming the song that he was always supposed to be. Yeah.
But yeah, that's so great, Ray. So spot on. And so, yeah, kind of diving into some questions. We're doing these series of 5-minute shorts ahead of the feature film called Shepherd, Poet, Worshipper, Warrior, and King. And, you know, David is all of those things. And I know both of you as well you're not shepherds, right? But, you know, poets, worshippers, warriors, and kings. And I'd love, if we start with you, Ray, is to discuss David's role as a kind of poet and songwriter, his role in the Bible.
Yeah, well, you know, David was born in a time when, in his world, it would have felt like a global trauma, and not that much unlike what we've all experienced in the last 2 or 3 years. And that global trauma, where all systems are in a state of upheaval, and he was born in, and we've got to remember now, you know, Saul and David had far more in common than we might think. Certainly, David is our hero. The reason he's our hero is, first, let's say, both of them, Saul and David, were flawed men. The difference in them, when Saul sinned, it hardened his heart. When David sinned, it broke his heart. And out of that brokenness, see, he had access to the wonder and beauty of God in ways that Saul didn't, because of the arrogance born out of position and power and prestige and all that he had going on in his head. And if you remember, Samuel told him at the end of his reign, man, let me tell you where you blew it, where you really messed up. It's when you forgot and you ceased to be small in your own eyes. And because of that, I believe God says, I'm going to find one that is small in his own eyes, but his eyes light up when he's in my presence. And so he found this shepherd boy who had the sensitivities and the sensibilities, the awareness of the world around him. But he, of course, he was isolated out there in the shepherd's field most of the time. But he wasn't really isolated only. It wasn't just insulation and isolation, because those can become dark places if we're not careful. But what he had was a place of solitude, and he had focus, and he also had imagination, and he was living in such a beautiful world, and he had a built-in sense of integrity and character that God was building in him as a shepherd boy, one who cares for others. Saul was not a shepherd; he was a donkey dealer. What does that tell you? But anyway, and you can take that anywhere you want to on your own time, because I'm gonna move on. But you see, you see political, like politicians and rulers and leaders never shape culture. They react to negative dynamics in culture, and when they react, they create boundaries and rules and regulations and laws for the world to run on. But they never shape culture. Tell you who shapes culture: songwriters do, poets do, the creatives do, because they don't just have access to the intellect, they have access to the heart, and they get to put things in the world that speaks to the spirit and awakens people to what they're born to be. That is a reality in cultures down through time. When a nation loses its identity, they're nations conquering nations, and pretty soon infiltrating and invading nations. They start taking that collective soul out of a nation. Look what happens. God will raise up the poets, raise up the writers. He'll raise up the songwriters. Because see, and when music and poetry comes to your life, it doesn't tell you what to do and how to do it. It awakens who you are. And so God used David to awaken Israel to be who they were really supposed to be. And there had been no worship in the days of Saul. But hey, he was looking for one that was after his own heart. And David is the only person that God ever said that about. And in the Old Testament, he says he sought and looked for one after his own heart. But over there in Acts, it says he found one after his own heart. So you see, that feels like that was a mission of God. When he sent Samuel across the field to anoint this shepherd boy, if you remember, he wasn't even there, because he was out there with the sheep. He was a misfit. He didn't belong. Look at the, we always think of him as the little shepherd boy who slung a rock and killed a giant. That's true, but it's so much more beautiful and powerful than that, because he was so multifaceted. He was a shepherd boy. He was a musician. He was a songwriter. He was a giant killer. He was a fugitive. Wow. He was a sinner. He was a murderer. He was a misfit, overlooked and overshadowed even by his own family. He even wrote songs about it. And that's the beauty of what made David who he was, is he found a way. Songwriting and poetry is one of the ways we can process our lives in a different place, rather than all the surface stuff. You can get deep in who you are by processing. And he wrote songs that caused all of Israel and the generations to come to process who they were in relationship to God. That's pretty awesome when you think about it. And the way flag me down, Rita, if I'm going too long. I'm from Kentucky. I come from a long line of talkers. Okay? As a matter of fact, at my house till this day, if you lose your breath, you lose your turn. So you may have to.
Dustin's going to have to fight you for time.
Listen.
No, but I'll just leave it right there. But I say all of his poetry and all of his songwriting was not, what's the dominant sound that shapes music today more than any other sound, that shapes all genres? The applause of man. The sound of applause will impact the way we write our songs and the way we live our lives if we're careful. He didn't move on that. he lived, he wrote out of longing. He longed for the courts of the Lord. He longed for the beauty of God. He longed to be, and he wasn't even allowed to be in the house of the Lord for numerous reasons. But the longing never went. So his longing determined, or his longing became his lyrics. Then his lyrics became eventually everyone's language. And that language then became the liturgy that we enjoy today. Liturgy was married to literature. And then literature became one of the ways we all access truth and process life. And because then life becomes our legacy. And what David left in his legacy was for the generations to know the goodness and the kindness and the beauty of God, and the authority of God, the grace of God, all these wonderful attributes and multifaceted God that we have. He was revealing him prophetically unto the generations. And he wrote so much about that, we can talk about his writing process later, but I don't want to really, honestly, I don't want to dominate the conversation, but David's one of my, should be our hero.
Yeah, absolutely. Ray, it's so wonderful. I love what you've been saying. And just so you know, there were some really awesome comments while you were talking, just like, oh my goodness, this is so insightful. This is so awesome. It totally shapes culture. And so thanks everyone for your comments. And there's another one, such wonderful insights from our director, Brent. Thank you. But really, really, really awesome. And I just have to say, I love what you said in the beginning about Saul running from God and David running to him in his brokenness and his sin. Because to be honest, that's the natural kind of the way Saul did is almost the natural, like, oh, I'm a sinner, I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like, this is too hard, right? Yeah. But David was just like, I'm so broken, Jesus, I need more of you, right? And that's, like, wow, that's so, it's so awesome. And I'd love to, Dustin, ask you, what impact have you seen David's songs have on the church and on modern worship?
Oh man, well, I could sit and listen to Ray talk all day, so I don't
It's
mind
wonderful,
going
isn't
back
it?
and letting Ray talk again. So good, but it's interesting because I think all those things that you just mentioned as poet and king and songwriter, and a lot of times we can look at those and fight for a title, but it actually just revealed like a function of David's heart. So it's pretty awesome because when you would see him write songs, you would actually see the warrior side of David come out. But when you see him as a shepherd, you already see him acting like a king. He's not, he doesn't have a crown on his head yet, but like when Saul says, what makes you think you could take on this giant? He says, well, I killed a lion and a bear with my bare hands, You're like, oh, that's pretty good, but he did it to protect sheep, which is right, that's a king's responsibility to people and to safeguard people. And then when he's a king, he actually is responding like a shepherd, like he's concerned about people. When he gets in the cave, it's like he's now got a whole nother group of sheep. And I love it because when he's songwriting and he says, there's a portion of scripture that says, you train my hands for war and my fingers for battle. And I always thought that was like he's going out to fight a war, but then I started thinking like that's probably him playing his harp. He's telling God, he's like, train my hands for war, my fingers for battle. Wasn't a sword, but it took a warrior attitude into a song. And it said like, I'm going to fight, but I'm going to fight the right fight. So the way it carries over into modern worship is you can watch situations that happen in David's life and you can say, how did he respond as a lover of God and with a heart, after God? How did he respond in this situation? And then you'll see him say, why so downcast, oh my soul? And he's like, put your trust in God. So there's something that happens today where we as songwriters, as Christian songwriters, one of my friends one time said, we have a huge responsibility because we get to put songs on the lips of the most powerful voice on the planet. And that's the church, and the powerful thing about that is then when I write songs, I don't just write songs about where we're at. I write songs about where we're headed. So even the song I Speak Jesus, you can watch David do the same thing. It's like, I'm going to speak a different kingdom over somebody's life who's walking through depression, anxiety, struggle, COVID, sickness, bad, and so just like Rhonda was talking about at the beginning, like there's something now that songs come out, and what it does is it acts as a sword, and it starts to fight against the things that have been going after my soul. And that's what David was doing. He's basically writing songs saying like, this is coming after my soul, but I know who you are, God. So he said things like this, like, so magnify the Lord with me, and so magnifying the Lord doesn't make the Lord bigger. It just gets bigger in your eyes. And David was really good at making God bigger in people's eyes. So then they had the opportunity to partner with this, and his song awakened something in them and carried an authority to cut to the core of what the issue was. And I feel like, today, obviously, with the stuff we've been going through the last couple of years worldwide, I mean, who would have ever thought that we could something that actually affected all of us at one time? But songs then can be released the same way. They can go around the world to impact and to awaken, just like COVID tried to kill some things in us. And what God is doing can awaken some things in us.
I love that's really amazing. And I just wanted to kind of a follow-up question, because I believe you're a father, right, of little kids?
Yes.
Awesome. So what particular aspects of David's character would you like to see brought out in a film on his life?
Oh man, there's so many things. I could just tell you this morning, I actually woke up with my 12-year-old and he didn't want to go to school because he's getting some bullying happening. And it's funny because the first story I brought up was of David. And I told him, like, hey, listen, man, when David shows up to fight Goliath, his brother is the first person to bully him. And he says, what are you doing here, you wicked and conceited person? You just came to watch the battle. But I told him, I said, when people bully you, they're not revealing who you are. They reveal who they are. And Eliab, when he says, you're wicked and conceited, you came to just watch the battle. Well, this is a warrior who just stood for 40 days listening to the taunt of an enemy that he did nothing. So he just watched the lack of a battle because he didn't fight. And he knew David is going to fight. That's why he hates it, because he's like, oh, shoot, this dang it, this kid showed up. And I've already been passed over to be king. David shouldn't have even been in the room, and now he's here at the battle. And I know he's going to fight, and so Eliab puts him down because honestly, Eliab becomes almost like a first giant, like before Goliath. And then Saul's the same thing. Saul's like, what do you think? Who do you think you are? You're a boy. And I told my son, I said, sometimes those voices are to keep you from fighting the right fight. And David didn't care. He wasn't just defending God's honor, defending the honor of God's people. So he says this, he says, who are you to defy the armies of the living God? So now his shepherd heart comes back out, right? Who are you? You're not going after these sheep. I'm gonna kill you, And I told my son, don't tell people, don't say I'm gonna kill somebody. But I said, but don't let it affect your heart, because God has put something on you. And sometimes the enemy uses other people to attack that thing, and as a dad, that it's powerful to watch David stand in those positions and protect sheep, just doing a responsibility, and it caused him to be a king. And so I told my son, I said, while some people are maybe bullying you, are you looking out for some people who don't have anyone? And so what that'll do is it'll cause you to go into a shell to shut down, so you don't fight the fight. And I want to, when I see David, and I want to see that, like, I love the beginning of this when they showed the video of him going after that sheep and throwing his life. He launches himself off a cliff, and I was like, I actually think David would have done that. He's like, because he puts himself in danger, but he cannot listen to what other people think about him. And as a dad, that's one of the most powerful things you can really instill into your children is like, what does God say about you? And let's just respond out of that, because people are always, they're not always going to see it. Sometimes they speak out of their own fear or their own insecurities. And I want to, I see that in David, where he just steps out. He's like, I'm going to come after these sheep. I'm going to protect them. I'm going to rescue them. And when my brother tries to put me down, I'm actually going to save him too. you know, and I'm actually going to rescue my brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so wonderful. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just to say thank you as well, there's a lot of people who have been pledging. It's been popping up on the screen, and guys, we're so thankful. We really are. Please keep going. And Ray, so you talk a lot in your teachings about the sound of heaven. I'd love to know what you envision that sound to be like.
Well, you know that it's there's only 30 minutes of silence in heaven. And you think about that, there's 30 minutes of silence in a place that's timeless, you know. And also in that place that's called heaven, 24/7 throughout a million millenniums, there's a sound that is sustaining the glory in the presence of God. And anyone with any kind of a governmental position actually have cast their crowns at his feet. And he is the center of everything in that moment. So what's going on behind the jasper walls is something that we'll get to experience throughout eternity. And think of it like this. I believe it sounds like all the frequencies in the sound spectrum and beyond, and all of the light spectrum and beyond, with this sense of infinity that reaches beyond time, beyond anything that we can even have an inkling of in this world. You know, it's so difficult to find words, but the words that we can know and find is everybody's there, but he's the center of it all. And the only movement that's happening there, of course, is the 24 elders there on their faces, while the 4 living creatures are just moving and hovering, as if they were hovering over this reality, as the Spirit of the Lord was hovering over this reality at one time, right? But God is light. In him, there's no darkness at all. And at the sound of his voice, he spoke. And as this earthly realm came to be, it was because it was coming from the sound of his voice and the light of his nature, the light of his glory. Well, we're going to be in the presence of that in ways that that's, you know, very seldom experienced on this side, of course. But now you got these 4 living creatures, and every time they move, they see him, a facet of his nature that's never been experienced before anywhere. So that's why they never run out of praise. They never run out of worship. They never run out of that inner language of the Spirit that acknowledges his glory and his power and his wonder and all that. But here's what they say every time they move. Because, you know, let's say there's the throne of God, but when you move, you see him from a different place. And all they can say is, holy.
Yeah.
And they move, holy. Holy. And there's always 3 holies: holy in the eternal past, holy in the eternal now, holy in the eternal future. So there's a triunity, there's a triad in the sound and the light that they're moving in. And with that, you know, like he's a Trinity, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. We're a Trinity, Spirit, Soul, and Body. Was, is, and is to come. That John was scribing as he was seeing the glory of God. Right. And by the way, John could have bailed out on that when he was trying to depict what he was seeing in that heavenly realm. He could have, because there in Revelation 1, the Lord tells him, hey, what you see, write it. Well, he could have said, hey, I'm just a guy that they threw out here in the Aegean Sea on the Isle of Patmos, the place of my killing. I'm just here to die. Why do I want to become what do you mean write it? I'm not a writer. He said, I didn't tell you you're a writer. I just said write. So write what you see. And so he starts writing what he sees. And then he turns to see the voice. Wait a minute. Wouldn't you turn? You hear a voice? He turns to see the voice, and there his head and hair is white like wool, white as any snow, eyes like a flame of fire, girt about in gold, and his mouth a 2-edged sword, and all this overwhelming image of the nature of God, and all he can do is holy. And one day we're going to be, imagine it like this: all of creation and all of humanity, this whole world, is diminished to a place that we're so overshadowed by his presence that all we can do is sing the song that we're born to sing. So, when you write a song today, I tell songwriters, when you write a song today, you're not writing next year's most popular chorus, guys. What you're doing is you're writing the next generation for accessing God. And that's what David was doing. He was constantly writing the next generation's access. That's why we have the liturgy and the poetry and all those things came down to always remind us that Lord, you are the strength of my life. You are my song. But when we get there, and I know I'm talking fast, but when we get there, we're all going to be able to sing the real us, unhindered, unencumbered by the things here that were enemies that brought distortion or any kind of a devaluing beauty of who God is. It won't be there. We won't have those distractions. We won't have any of that there. So now that's a thumbnail, but Rita, you can see that picture too, where David set it in motion. He created a worshiping generation, and then one day the Son of David would come, conceived in worship, held in a womb of worship, born into a worship atmosphere where they had to come and worship him. He was there to restore worship, restore everything that his father David had set in motion. And every time there were generations that passed when idolatry would move in, no, they'd have to, God would raise up somebody to restore worship. That was always what it was about. And that's why Jesus came, to restore humanity to a right relationship of worship with the Father. And that's what we'll take to heaven with us. Because we'll be singing the blood and light of Jesus is what we're going to be singing in that place when we're in his presence. So
that is so wonderful. Thank you so much, Ray. And Crystal posted a really awesome comment while you're talking. She said, the power of God plus the power of animation and the power of music. She was just like, wow, like mind blown. I'm paraphrasing, but and I love that. We always say, oh, there we go. The power of music with the power of animation and with the power of God all in one. Nothing is more powerful. Thanks, Crystal. That's awesome. Yeah, totally true. And Dustin, I wanted to ask you, so is there anything that you find particularly unique about David as a songwriter or worship leader?
I think the thing I love about it is it's birthed out of personal experience. It's not just a guy who sat down and tried to figure out how to rhyme some words and put something together, which happens a lot now. I think when you find somebody who walks in experience, they walk in authority, and that it's a picture of, later on Jesus, when he opens the scroll, it says the Spirit of the Lord is on me to preach good news, bind up the brokenhearted, and set the captives free. And it said, and the people were amazed because he spoke with authority, unlike the teachers of the law. And so there is, you know how it is when some people speak and it's like, that's really good. And then somebody else can get up and say almost the same thing. You're like, whoa, that was awesome, but there's an authority to it. And I think David just carried that authority because he lived it. He wasn't just trying to write a song to somebody. He was trying to explain the nature and the character of God and his response to it, or creation's response to it, or what creation's response should be to it. So, it's like he's talking about the stars in the sky. He's talking about the birds of the air, but he's talking about his own heart. And he's like, there's certain things that I need examined into me. And so as he's writing, he writes out of this incredible experience. So when you read it, you can feel like this is real life. This isn't somebody just wrote a song and just tried to get me to sing some song, but it's the power of somebody who actually lived a life with God, and then an overflow of that. The Bible says the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So David's living an overflow life, and it just comes out through song. Songs becomes his weapon.
Oh, it's amazing. I love that. And I've just seen we've only got about 15 minutes left, and I'm so sad because I could really talk to you guys for hours. But
hey Rita, excuse me, could I put a tag on a little bit of what Dustin just said? See, David had the ability, because he lived this life of such authenticity with musical expression and dance, his emotion. Man after God's own heart, his heart was so big, he lived it out loud in so many ways. Musically, just like God does. Creatively, just like God does. He's created by the Creator to be creative, just like us. And now, but what and how it would manifest in his life, because of this authentic interaction he had, he made a vow unto God: 7 times a day I will perform this vow unto the Lord. 7 times a day I'm going to praise the Lord. And the way he did it, can you imagine 7 times a day? All of a sudden he just breaks into a song. Hand me my guitar. Oh, the enemies are coming to kill all of us. Give me my guitar.
Yeah.
You know, we're being overwhelmed. Oh, you know, my life is falling apart. I would just throw myself at the ground, but I know I'd miss. He gets in all this depression and despair, and he becomes a blues singer. So, but 7 times a day, this is what my enemy's doing, but I will yet praise the Lord my God. And he had a staff appointed to follow him around and capture the lyrics, write it down, get this over to the chief musician upon so-and-so. There's an instrument that will translate and interpret what's going on in my spirit, and this will become a sound that is a part of God's people. Then he would deputize the whole nation of Israel to lead creation in worship. Praise him, sun, praise him, moon, praise him, stars, praise him, beasts of the field, and praise him. See, so he lived a life in symphony, in agreement with God, and his creativity was the strength of his reign. For 33 years, nonstop. The song didn't stop for 33 years, same length of Jesus' life. He reigned for 40 years, but for 33 of it, the music never stopped. Yeah.
That is incredible. I mean, 7 times a day, it does just blow my mind. I'm trying to do this thing where I do twice a day. I stop for a couple of minutes and I don't make it most days, you know, and it's a minute. It's literally, I need to stop for 1 minute. And, you know, I struggle to do that. So it's mind blowing.
He prayed 3 times a day, but praised 7 times a day. It was a lifestyle, like Dustin said.
Yeah, that's so incredible. And that kind of leads me to maybe one of our last questions from us, but we'll have some audience questions, I'm sure, as well. But what do we know about the specific instruments used during David's time?
Me?
That's you, Ray.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you can find a lot of them in the inscription or in the superscription of the Psalms themselves. I know, you know, there's debate on whether or not the numbers that were added go to the psalm that's beneath it or before it or whatever. There's a lot of things that everybody's still mining out, you know, and we need those holy archaeologists that will dig down into the music like that. And I'm thankful for all of the diversity of opinion and all that. But anyway, what we do know is obviously the sound of his instruments would have been acoustic. Didn't have the technologies that we have today. When you see, he would say, like to the chief musician upon Nahaloth, well, that would be a flute. When you say, he would say, okay, I wrote this as soon as the song is written, and he's got those appointed to thank, to praise, and to record. King James says, but it's that word zakar, which means to commemorate, write, engrave, inscribe. In other words, get this down. Now get this song over to the chief musician upon Nahaloth. So this is a flute section. Or to the chief musician upon Neganoth, stringed. Let's call that a guitar. Or Sheminith, that would have been a double bass. I'll get this over, and even one situation, coronet, even though that's a mistranslation. English, guys, you got to watch them. Because there's so much beautiful pictures and imagery and metaphor and simile and all that, but there's also a lot of the Hebrew idioms that we don't even have in our culture need to be explored to fully understand what the sound and the music and all that would sound like. But he might say, to the chief musician upon Shoshaniduth, trumpets of assemblage. So pretty soon you start seeing, like that one place where it said coronets, that's not a coronet, it was a sistrum. It was part of the spoil that was brought out of Egypt. It looks like a slingshot with little cymbals on it. It was a rattle that was brought out. That at one time was used to access the presence of Isis and many of the Egyptian deities and all the idolatry that was holding that people captive. God's people brought those instruments out as well as spoil. And now, you know, and tabrets, you see tabrets. Well, there's tabrets, timbrels, and tambourines, I guess you could say. And it's all comes out of the idea of a toph, which is a frame drum, and that's what Miriam grabbed a hold of. But they would have had one of those Egyptian things as well. And it was used also in Egypt to vex God's people and to shut them down and hush them down. When your job is mashing out mud between your toes, making bricks for the man. And your song is gone, your beauty is gone, your creativity, your art, your dance, you don't have it. It was nothing. Our job is this morbid bondage and slavery. And the only sound of the voice was a moan, a minor modic moaning of the people of God. They were no song, no singing. And when they would, if there would be an expression beyond what these people lording over them, that would shut them down. But you see it on the other side of the river when worship was restored, and the worship got restored out of obedience, and it's going to do the same thing in our life. When Moses gets to the river, or gets to the water, and he didn't have to have a stick raising or sea parting faith. All he needed was stick raising obedience. When he raised that stick out of obedience, they went across it, because he said, "Let my people go that they may come away and worship." That's what it was about. And worship is art and sound and dance and light and coming alive. And now look at those people who had no song, no instruments, no expression. They became the greatest composers in the world, the greatest artists, the greatest cinematographers, the greatest painters, the greatest conductors of symphonies and composers, and all of that was in the DNA of those people that would be awakened to who that. And so, but anyway, cornet is translated, or it's translated cornet, but it's sistrum. So the idea is we need to explore, because David had attached such a priority to it. There are tones and textures, sounds, rhythms, movements, all that causes a very different response in us, neurologically, physically, emotionally, even down to a cellular level. Certain tones and frequencies awaken. That's why many times people are healed in the midst of the sound of worship, because they're accessing something there in the beauty of the spirit realm. I'm not trying to get weird with you. I'm just saying God's a whole lot bigger than we think he is sometimes. And God can do his presence carries things that we don't always understand intellectually, but our spirit will come alive to the sound of his presence. And that's what motivated and drove David. His music was not, this flowery kind. No, it was real. It was authentic. And he accessed the presence of God. And all of God's people had access to God in those days. It wasn't some hierarchical system set up. It was all the functional authority even was a musical expression. Remember, David says, David and the captains separated to the service of the house of the Lord, Asaph, Jeduthun, and Heman, that their sons and daughters would prophesy upon the harps, cymbals, and timbrels. So what they were doing is they created a generation that was carrying the sound of God's desire, prophesying through their instrument. And there was an old guy taught him how to do it too. His name is Kenaniah. He instructed about the song because he was skillful, taught the value of all the instruments and the tones that were there, because the Hebrew language, with no vowels, they only have consonants, but they could actually play the designated consonants of the presence of God, play the name of God. So when they would touch the strings, they were playing the triune expression of God's manifest glory would come through their instruments. He instructed about the song. Masah is the Hebrew word. Masah, the prophetic mantle or weightiness or burden that would rest upon the shoulders of the musicians so that when they played, God would respond. Now that's some musicians. That's amazing. The same kind of guys that are coming down the hill, and Samuel said, hey, you're going to run into a band tomorrow coming down the hill, and this band plays. You'll no longer be the same person. Now that's what we got to have in our generation, doing films and depicting the beauty of that. We need to know who we are. And this film can awaken a whole new understandings of God that we really need to have right now. Listen, look what the world thinks of God today. Could it possibly be that we've misrepresented him? Could it possibly be part of the need for us to repent and humble ourselves? We'll never change the world by becoming like the world. We'll never change the church by becoming like the church. It's time for a new sound and a new language of the Spirit.
Incredible. Yeah. I love that. Thank you so much, Ray. And we've got about 5 minutes left, and I know there's some questions coming in. So if you guys are cool, we can head over to questions. So the first one I see from Tracy, she says, you've assembled an awesome team of like-minded professionals to make this movie. How did you find each other? So, well, I'll talk specifically about us on the call. But so Rhonda and Jason, we have amazing partners at Minnow. And Dan and Denise and all of them, they're just so wonderful and kind and generous with everything to us. And they put us in touch with Jason and Rhonda. And so, and then Rhonda can kind of speak to, well, I think you did at the beginning, how you got in touch with Ray and Dustin. But just to quickly say, we found it incredible in our journey on this project, how God has just brought the right people at the right time together. It has completely blown us away. And Phil and Jackie, who run Sunrise, have always said what we do is relationship. The most important thing we do at our company is relationship. It's all about people, and they say people are more important than the product and the process and everything. And they are incredible at nurturing relationships and building relationships. And I've actually been working with them now for 20 years. This is my 20th year. And it is just because it's such a family, and it's so, it's complete, it's relational. And I think, God has just been incredible in bringing together people who, as you say, it's just super like-minded people, and it just keeps happening. God keeps bringing the people to the project, and so we are just kind of rolling with it and feeling very, very lucky. And so a question, Ryan, will you use traditional instruments for the music? I'm going to let Rhonda take this one.
Yes, we have consulted with Ray, and Ray has incredible instruments that we are going to go to his house and record. And then there is a guy here in Los Angeles at UCLA who is known as a Jewish musicologist. He has studied the history of the Jewish music and has become a doctorate in it. And so he is highly educated in it. And UCLA has a collection of historic instruments that probably don't go back to that time. I don't think there's been instruments that have lasted that long, but they definitely have the vintage instruments that can create sounds very similar to what they have used in the past. So yes, we are going to do our best to get our hands on traditional instruments. Something else that I wanted to speak about when both Dustin and Ray have touched on creation, worship and creation. One of the things that Jason wants to do is we want to take a team of recorders, people who know technology, which would not be me, and we want to go into Israel, and we want to go into the valley where the battle happened between David and Goliath, and we want to record the sounds. We want to record the cave that he hid in, and we want to record the sounds of creation that are in that actual area that David's life took place. And we want to take those sounds and we want to merge them into the symphony that is going to go on top of this soundtrack for the movie. We want the voice of creation in that traditional space to be able to speak through our modern technology today. So that was Jason's idea. I'm going to give him credit for that, because that blew my mind of going, wow, like we have technology that is going to be able to capture where this happened, and we're going to be able to place it into modern technology for all of us to hear. And I'm super excited about it, because I do believe that this is a powerful God, and he's going to move in ways that we've never heard and never expected. And what an incredible opportunity to give another extension of his creation to cry out and to worship and put it on film. Like, how crazy is that?
It's incredible.
Amazing.
I love that so much. We've got a question here from Kathy. She says, what kind of impression do you want viewers to get from this movie, David? So we have this thing, Kathy, that we say, so like if my area of responsibility is music and voiceover, if, you know, with Rhonda and Jason and everyone who's working on the music and, you know, the guys who are the animation team, we want every department, you know, we want people to walk out of there. We want them to be competing for like, oh my goodness, the music, oh my word, the voiceovers, oh my word, the quality of the animation, you know what I mean? We like, we all want everyone to, so we want everything. We want everyone to kind of win. But I guess the biggest thing we want people to take away from this movie is we want them to be inspired about who God is, right? And David's relationship with God. God saying, David is a man after my own heart. Like, we want people to walk away inspired to live courageously, inspired to live lives of faith, and inspired to walk away knowing that God is like a God full of love and not like a stuffy headmastery kind of God. You know, David lived this wild life of adventure, you know, and was kind of daring and just had this kind of bold faith, this like, you know, he would jump off a cliff literally, you know, and just trust that God would, you know, would save it and it would work out. And so we want people to maybe not jump off cliffs, but like, walk out of the movie just feeling really, really inspired about who they are as children of the King. You know, that's the biggest thing. We want people to know how precious and loved they are and to feel emboldened to live lives of passion and courage. Because it's actually the truth, you know. We just sometimes need reminders, I think. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then one more movie. Jessica says, "How can I get this movie?" This is going to be our last question, guys. Just so you know, Jessica. So it'll be released in 2025, and it is going to be a theatrical. Our goal is theatrical worldwide release, and then obviously everything that follows after that will go to streaming. So hopefully keep tracking on angel.com/David. We will be communicating everything about the release when time comes. So we're still a couple of years away, but we're going to keep talking and keep sharing and keep posting. And so we'd love you to continue to walk this journey with us. But guys, thank you so much. My goodness, it has been I feel super lucky to have been able to talk to you, Dustin, Ray, Rhonda. Thank you so much for co-hosting tonight. And Ray and Dustin, God bless you guys. You are both really incredible. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. We are really grateful.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Such a pleasure. Awesome, guys. Have an awesome day. And everyone keep well.
All right.